Gus Grande. I'm the Chief Executive of Eden Geothermal, and I'm here to talk to you about our Eden Geothermal project in Cornwall. I also have here our consulting geologist, Lucy Cotton, and what I was hoping to do was to whiz through some slides and then probably take questions, because one of the big lessons about geothermal is that every project is different, and so everybody's questions will probably be different, and I can't possibly cover it all. So, here we go. The great thing about geothermal is it's literally as secure as the rock beneath your feet, and boy oh boy do we need that security now. What we've done is we created a company to deliver the Eden Geothermal project, and this was an industrial research project paid for by largely the European Union, but also Cornwall Council and Gravis Capital. We drilled a deep geothermal well into the granite to provide the Eden project with geothermal heat for its biomes, a new nursery and other buildings. So what we've got is we are supplying heat via a heat main and through a coaxial system. So this is quite an unusual project. It's a single well that we drilled 5,277 metres down, and then we've inserted an insulated, vacuum insulated tube down to 4 kilometres. Hot water is sucked up the middle with using an electric submersible pump, and then goes out through heat exchangers to the heat main, returns, and then goes out down through the outside of the system. So I'm here today to talk to you about 7 steps to geothermal happiness. We at the Eden Project are so delighted. We became the first project in 37 years in the UK to become operational earlier this summer. And geothermal heat is a really, really good heat solution for large institutions, hospitals, anybody who needs large-scale institutional heat, so hospitals, universities, food factories. It provides baseload capacity of up to 93%. You just have to shut it down for a couple of weeks over to look at the pumps and valves and everything, and you can run it like the clappers as your base load. It's also incorrectly perceived of as being expensive, but actually in the continent where they've done an awful lot of geothermal, it's pretty cheap. We're talking 26 euros a megawatt hour installed heat in France, something like 29 in Germany, and in fact the latest figures I've got from France were about 22 euro cents a megawatt hour. And it's the heat from beneath your business. You're not going to be worried about your biomass supply chains. You're not going to be worried about what Mr. Putin does next. It can be retrofitted into urban areas. In Paris, there are over 50 projects. They've been running since the 1970s, including Orly Airport. And the skills and equipment is there. It's the skills and equipment from the oil and gas industry that are looking to pivot into this business. It has a very, very low impact. The smallest surface footprint of any energy source, and the 93% lifetime emissions lower than gas heating, and 0 emissions and particulates in operation. But it's very, very rare in the UK. We are rarer than pandas, because there are still 2 in Edinburgh, even though they're going back at Christmas. And why the hell is this? The answer is probably the geothermal risk profile. This very, very common slide that you've probably seen around geothermal presentations before, if you've ever seen a geothermal presentation before, is about the risk profile. So basically, at the beginning, it's pretty risky, but also the investment cost is relatively low until you get to drilling. So you do need to put in a bit of money before you even know whether it's going to work. And the whole project is essentially an exercise in risk management. So if you want to reduce your risks and start on your progress to geothermal joy, we suggest that the very, very, very first thing you do, like we did at the Eden Project, is to engage your stakeholders. if it's a long-term project, it's a risky project, you need to get your boss on board, you need to get your boss's boss on board, you need to get your local community on board, you need to get your colleagues on board. And that is my first and most important lesson for your steps to geothermal happiness. At Eden, we're lucky, we've been doing it for 20 years. And the NHS is also lucky because, my goodness, do we all want the NHS to succeed. And we're very, very impressed that the NHS is decarbonising so far. But we really, really, really need people to get in there and get in with your community stakeholder first. Across the UK, we really do have pretty good geothermal resources. If we're looking at heat, which most people will be, there's a few places that you can do electricity, like in Cornwall and some bits of Scotland and some bits of the North East and North West. You're looking at heat projects. The sort of pinky stodges are where we're probably looking. And that is about a third of constituencies, about half local authorities. And the BGS, who are here and available for you to talk to, have recently done a study that shows that 113 of the biggest NHS trusts have geothermal resources beneath them, 50 degrees or so, between 1 and 3 kilometres. So go and talk to them immediately. What we have here is an expression of a few of the geothermal concepts that we're looking at. So geothermal comes in a number of different flavours. You're probably all familiar with ground source heat pumps, which is both for heating and cooling. But then we move down deeper and deeper, and the deeper you go, the hotter it gets. And geothermal, we are as hot as the surface of the sun down at the centre of the earth. So the pieces that we're looking at here are the direct geothermal heat for heat and power. So this is probably hydrothermal systems. You have a doublet system, hot down one side, cold up the other, and that will be basically what we're looking at. But it must be said that if you're looking at these hydrothermal systems, you're probably in a sedimentary basin, and that means you have layers of geology beneath you. You have layers of different kind of rocks, and all those rocks have different characteristics of permeability and porosity. And what you need is permeability and some water. But you might be able to have it at different depths. So it is true that the deeper you drill, the more expensive it is. But if you're in a hot sedimentary aquifer, you've probably got several options. So rather than running a ground source heat pump with a COP with about 4, if you're only lifting your water, you have a higher inlet temperature and you're only lifting your water 10 or 20 degrees because you're getting it at 60 from your aquifer, then probably you might be looking at a COP of 8, and that will be really, really helping your decarbonisation target. So, what's the process? It's exploration, stakeholder engagement first, that's your very, very first thing that you've got to do, and then there's a deep feasibility process. For the first place, you need to understand what is beneath you. And for that, there are some pretty good data sets, particularly if you're in an area that's already been explored for oil and gas, which largely these sedimentary basins have been. You need geothermal potential, and to work out whether the best option for you is to drill shallower or drill deeper and have augmented heat pumps or direct geothermal use. Then you move along to exploration and risk mitigation. You probably do some, if you're thinking about doing a big operation for anybody, you first of all do kind of surface work, and then you move deeper. So you'll be looking at geophysical explanations. Some of those are a bit like an ultrasound. You have seismometers, and then you create a small seismic event, possibly with a small explosion or with a thumper truck, and then you'll be able to see how the seismic waves are reflected back up to the sensor and get a kind of ultrasound of what's beneath your site. You also desperately probably need, before you go in for a big operation, a biopsy. So that would be going in and digging deeper and taking out a sample of what's beneath you. This is exactly what we need to do with an exploration borehole. So you would be drilling a narrow, deep borehole, probably not as deep as your system, but just to check that it really is porous and permeable. So this is the concept. The exploration objective is to find and characterise your potential reservoir layer right beneath you, and to match it with the right temperature demand. So you will be drilling 2 wells, probably. You drill one down through into your permeable rock layer and through the bottom, so you know exactly where it is and how deep it is, and then another. These will have to be separated, and this is also an important part of the design, because you will need to be able to get the water through and up without cooling the resource beneath you. The deeper you go, the hotter it gets, and the average UK gradient is about 25 degrees C a kilometre, but this can be much higher in some basins rather than others. So if you're talking about Southampton, they have had a geothermal system working there for very many years, and they get 74 degrees C at about 1,800 metres. If you're in that basin, you're lucky. But there are some other high temperature basins as well. Cornwall, we are about 39 degrees, I believe. Yeah, 39 degrees a kilometre. So here's your exploration borehole. It's a vertical, small diameter, partially cored borehole. So that means that you take out cores from the side so you can see exactly what is in the rocks beneath you. You do geophysical logs, you do temperature logs, you test the permeability, you do test and pump it to see how efficient it is, and you probably also take water samples so that you can reassure the EA that you're not going to be doing anything difficult there. Now, this exploration borehole does not take a big amount of car park or effort or time. You're looking at a rig, probably a lorry-mounted crane, which you can see on the picture on the right is what it looks like when it's up. Not more than 20 metres. You might need temporary planning permission, but it's fairly straightforward. This is, of course, because already you will have got your community entirely on side with the idea of people doing drilling and seismic surveys in the area. So this is what we did. And this is then you finally get to drilling. This is drilling at the Eden project in 2021. As you can see, this is a big rig, and the reason that it's a big rig is because we were doing an investigation going down really deep. We drilled 5,277 metres down into the rock. This rig is a beautiful oil rig, borrowed from the oil industry, as is all very much of the tech for geothermal drilling. So out there is an industry, the oil and gas industry, that is looking for other things to do. It's looking to pivot towards decarbonisation, and we're very, very hopeful that in the short future, geothermal will be scaled up using oil and gas technology. However, it must be said, beware. There are differences between oil and gas and geothermal. You need specialist geologists, you probably need specialist rig management, you need people who understand geothermal muds and geothermal reservoir management. And these people are not hard to find. Very often people want to jump from the oil and gas industry and will jump into looking to have a fun job on a rig where you don't have to be behind the fence. This our project here runs beside a bridle path, and one of the things that we were most worried about when we were setting it up was whether the horses would be upset by seeing a rig or not seeing a rig. In fact, it turns out that they don't care about drilling rigs at all, and so we had an entirely see-through fence. We had, just behind where this picture was taken, we had a public viewing area, so people could see the rig in action, and they are an amazing piece of kit. They're incredible pieces of kit, but they're also an incredible expression of human cooperation. This is an industry that can move fast and move quickly into the decarbonisation space. So here's a few pictures of the rig going up and some of the rig in action. The picture at the top in the centre that looks like a space control panel is the driller's chair. He sits up there and directs exactly how the drilling is being done. It's known as the doghouse. The man underneath him is a gentleman from one of the oil services companies who is in charge of directional drilling, so drilling our well down to hit our target, which was about 2.5 kilometres away. So we drilled straight down for a bit, and then we steered into our fractured reservoir 2.5 kilometres away, and this man was therefore known as Billy the Kink. And it really is the smallest final surface footprint of any energy source. This is the rig while it was drilling at the IHEEM project. You can see the sea, and you can just see the top of the biomes to the left of the picture. And this is our site when it had all finished and all gone away. And in fact, this is before we got rid of the green steam producers and the second container. So we're literally 2 containers and a Christmas tree. You can fit it into any car park almost anywhere. So this is what we're heating, the rainforest biome at Eden, and Eden has already put up a new nursery and also in order to better use the resource. And this is the geothermal energy plant. Now our consortium has got geoscience in it, who are the geologists of choice for onshore geothermal projects in the UK. Lucy has been involved in drilling the only 2 geothermal projects to have drilled so far. We also have a very happy investor who is coming back for more, and that's why we're here, because we want to persuade NHS estates to come and do more geothermal. More geothermal. The more geothermal, the better. It can support the grid, it can support decarbonisation, and it can support your hospitals with incredible, secure heat. And this is a last slide. I was looking for a critical infrastructure slide. This is the case study for Orly Airport. And as you can see, if you can do it at an airport, you can do it at a hospital. And they're doing it abroad. This is not a niche technology. It may be niche at the moment, but in the Netherlands, geothermal will account for 25% of reductions from greenhouse gas savings by 2050. In Germany, they're putting in 100 additional projects by 2030 and generating 10 terawatt hours. And in France, they're aiming for 100 terawatt hours of heat in 15 to 20 years. So, please, questions? How are your projects? Where are your projects? Do you need a drilling engineer? What would you like to ask? Anything? No? No? Not a single question. Okay.
What's the kind of unusually cost saving is that? What's the actual payback? What's the cost to start out expansion? What's the payback?
Okay, so the question is what's the payback? That is a very, very difficult question to answer, I'm afraid. So, as I said, it's the whole geothermal process is a project of risk management. So you can't know exactly what the payback for your particular project is until you've done the early exploration work. However, Engie in France is now quoting 22 euros a megawatt hour installed. So that's the kind of prices that you're looking at for projects in places when they've done it a lot. But it very much depends on what is your target, how much of the heat you can use, and whether you can cost share perhaps with other institutions in the area. So for example, at Eden we're doing greenhouses, and of course the problem with greenhouses is they don't need any heat in the summer. So in fact we've just got permission to put a distillery on our site in order to be able to use to balance the load when we don't need it. But yeah, it's not. That is part of the issue. This is why we are still pandas rather than starlings. But having said that, we do know that the barrier to entry for a feasibility study is fairly low. BGS has already done a very, very sort of broad brush study for the whole of the UK and for the hospitals in particular. But so, cost entry for a geothermal study, which will give you these options of how deep and probably whether you need to augment it with heat pumps or whether you go for direct geothermal, comes in at about 35 grand, something like that. So although it's a bit of a bump, it's not an absolutely enormous problem to start off with.
So I've got a question. So you mentioned there's a paucity in the UK of these types of schemes. How many schemes are there, and are there any within a critical infrastructure environment?
Exactly. Paucity is the exact word. We are the first in 37 years.
The first one? Right.
The first one in 37 years. But that is not to say that there won't be more. We're talking to a lot of clients, and although Eden is not a critical infrastructure environment, obviously the fact that they do them in other countries, retrofit in Orly Airport in particular, does show that it can be done. And one of the things that's very encouraging about geothermal is, although there is disruption to start off with, so probably for a typical hydrothermal project, you're looking at drilling maybe 6 months to a year, and you need to make the site good first. It's in, but then it's out, it's gone. You don't need to worry about it. It's very, very low noise, relatively low noise. So we had a planning requirement that we didn't break 45 decibels at night, and neighbours very close by, 200 metres or so. Our loudest issue on the noise monitoring was the Good Dawn chorus in the hedge. So it really can be acceptable. Another issue that people often raise is how is this different from fracking? And of course the reason that this is different from fracking is because you are not releasing fossil fuels into the atmosphere and not contributing to decarbonisation, but it does have some similarities to it. So for example, we have to monitor very carefully for seismic activity, and that means that you have to have a seismic hazard assessment and a seismic network installed, which also may cause you issues around your community engagement. But again, both the projects at United Downs and the Eden project have worked very, very hard on specific tools for community engagement around seismicity, and neither of us have had any problems, although both sites did actually have felt events during drilling and testing. But there's a long way between a felt event and any actual damage to house and home. And once people understand that and support the fact that you're doing something decarbonising rather than fossil fuel exploration, we found that people are very supportive.
Another question as well, please. So the map that you showed,
Do you want me to go back to it?
Yeah. Where there is the potential for geothermal schemes, is it that in the southeast, predominantly the southeast of the country, is that because there is a lack of igneous intrusion subsurface?
There may be other. This is a pretty blobby map. This is, as you can see, it's pretty vague. That is a pretty blobby map. I'm not a geologist, so it's a technical term from my point of view. It's a pretty blobby map. The lady next door to you has a much better map, and large parts of the southeast actually are on her new map. This was just an early assessment, which is about sedimentary basins. So most of the country, as you can see, the southwest and the Midlands is sedimentary basins, and there are sedimentary basins also under London, but they tend to be much shallower. So in that case, you'd probably be looking at an augmented heat pump. So you might be able to get a bit of the heat, which would improve your COP of water-to-water heat pumps, but you're probably not doing a pure geothermal scheme. No? Right. Well, we love geothermal, and we would very much like if more people would come and join our geothermal community in the UK, because we think that it could do 25% of heating by 2050 if we get moving. days. So with that, unless anybody has anything else? No? Oh yes.
So in arid environments you have a closed loop system, but are there any water losses in the UK?
So the question was about water losses. In the UK, luckily, we do have aquifers. So ours is a closed loop system. It goes down and back up, so we don't have any issues about water losses. In an open loop system, it would depend on the aquifer that you were on, and also depend on Environment Agency extraction limits about which aquifer that you went into. But it probably shouldn't be too much of an issue here in the UK because we do have wonderful aquifers, thank goodness. Good. Well, thank you very, very much for coming. And please, if anybody would like to learn more, please come and visit us down at the Eden Geothermal project, and we can show you our invisible plant.